in that perspective, 80 grand for the winner is certainly a hell of a lot of money. And again, I suppose ties into, you know, the most lucrative prize as the government are touting. I meant to put on a funny accent / voice, but I didn't really mean for it to come across that condescending.
That's funny because we started this being like, I think I'm going to done good here. And then we're like 5 minutes in and Cam's going, the most lucrative prize. Yeah. And, you know, we do have to take a moment and acknowledge that we know Triple M listeners around the country are despairing at this decision. And I, for one, will be putting my FM radio out to mark the loss of any traditional Australian rock artists in these awards.
Nothing gonna piss me off more than a bloody Victorian coming up and taking our funds. It's like, your art scene's good enough down there, pal. Yeah. You don't need to take ours. Back. We're trying our best.
Close the border.
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest.
Who knows? It might be maybe it's the bandwidth thing.
Probably. Actually, do you know what? I actually got a hold of my local federal MP today and asked them, hey, NBN rollout, what's the go? I've been told December 2025. And he said, yep, I don't know anymore. Was along the short of it, but it's happening, was what he could tell me.
Well, you've got about 5 days, and if it's not happening on the 1st of December, that's when we arrange the pitchforks and the placards and
that's
the
when we riot.
Contained fires and things like that, you know?
Yeah, to the NBN Television Co. studios and go, fuck.
Yeah. Our confusion, we're like, everybody, we're going to protest the NBN. And then we just put NBN into Google Maps and we just rock up at the NBN studios, the regional news network, and we may as well just protest here. You know, they're the same acronym. You know, if they were really against it, they should have launched a court case when NBN first named themselves.
And look, worst case, I mean, there's some journalists and some reporters and some cameras there. We can, you know, we'll make headlines, but with our protests at the wrong venue. But then we can then protest the right thing with the, you know, right people on board.
That's right. Just screaming into a camera. We're not really actually meant to be here. This was a bit of a stuff up. However, it's actually worked out quite fortunate that you can film us. And then we plead our case.
Yeah. Indeed. Well, look, I want to start this episode. It's the I suppose the base of the story is sad. But then we're going to, you know, sprinkle, I know, a tambourine or something light. I don't know. I tried to use a music analogy and it probably didn't work well at all. But
I'm just imagining a sprinkling tambourine right now.
But we both, strangely, both had both of our family dogs were, you know, put to sleep since our last recording. Sasha was 17, little Shih Tzu cross poodle. Throw a ball, she'll follow it, she'll chase it. Had, you know, loved all of that side of life. But something else that she did really enjoy was a good cheeseburger from McDonald's. This is not sponsored. However, I am loving it. No, she loved the cheeseburger, but she was like the fussiest eater. It was ridiculous. Like, you get some ham and she'd go, maybe what else you got? And it's like, really? Like, do you know how many dogs would just be like a vacuum if you put some ham up to them? But no, she was fussy. And then she'd come back in 10 minutes and go, okay, how's that ham looking now? You know, nothing else has come out available. I might go back to the ham. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll settle for this.
Yeah. Very spoiled. But she did love a Macca's cheeseburger, specifically the patty. And then my sister realized, instead of wasting, you know, all that money on a whole cheeseburger, she'll just get a hamburger. And then she thought, well, hang on, I can customize the order on the app. So I can, you know, remove everything except for the patty. And then that way I can just have the patty sent. One evening, my sister went to do that, you know, remove the buns, if she ordered a cheeseburger, remove the cheese, remove the onions, get rid of the sauce, just the patty. She opens the bag. opens the wrapper and it's empty. There's just nothing inside the wrapper. And she's gone, what? And she's
How do you wrap an empty wrapper?
She's looked back to her order and she's ordered a cheeseburger with no bun, no pickles, no patty, and no bottom bun. So the Bacchus employee has gone, they've ordered a hamburger with no hamburger, give her a hamburger wrapping and put it in the bag.
I'll just wrap this air up.
Yeah. And charged her $4 for it.
Oh, that was my next question. Did you have to pay for that? Gee, the price of wrapping's really gone out the window with Cosy Lives.
I just love whoever that Macca's employee is. If you are strangely listening to this and you remember that order coming through, I would love to know the thought process when they saw that order come through their screen. They would have gone, what do they want from me here?
They're having a laugh and they just played along with it. But actually, they disappointed a lovely old dog.
Well, I mean, sister's fault for ordering it without anything. But then, like, for them to just give a hamburger wrapper, I thought was hilarious.
It is golden and charge for the premium too,
Yeah.
which is very, very funny. I had a similar thing happen with Subway. My partner Jade ordered one for me once, and I can't remember what happened, but it basically it was just the bread. There was some kind of cock up in that where it was just the bread. And I was with her family, and then they all kind of like pulled off various bits of theirs to kind of like give me something for lunch because we were all starving.
Look, I'm not big on my tomato. You
And
can
I
have
still
my
give
tomato.
a shit about that. Yeah.
Here's the pepperoni. You can have a bit of that.
Yes, absolutely. But yes, people, if you're out there and you have a dog, hug your dogs. It doesn't matter how old they get. Sasha was 17. My dog Oki was 16. It was about as good an innings as you could possibly ask for from a dog. But they still crush your soul into a million pieces when you lose them. So give them a hug. Don't take any moments for granted because, as we know when we get them, their time is fleeting.
Indeed. But something that isn't fleeting is the fact that the Homebrewed boys are here to deliver a music news edition of the podcast, which means we've got
It
all
could
things...
be fleeting though.
Oh,
It's
well,
been
yeah.
a couple.
Yeah.
We did mix our order up a bit, just the way we had things recorded and the way we're trying to map out the end of the year and the way it all fell. We had to do some jumble. So you got 2 interviews in a row, 2 weeks in a row. One with Dialectic, then with Alaskia, some great Central Coast artists. Go back and listen to those if you like them. But now we are back on music news turf.
Yeah, which as you've now heard, you know, what we've been going through the last few weeks, you can probably understand why we decided not to sit down and record a news last week. But look, the government, they're involved today in a way.
They're involved.
They're always involved. There's a phrase which I like. It's not really all. I mean, I guess it is a little bit connected. You may not fuck with politics, but politics will fuck with you. And that's like that's the base of to use the same analogy, the base of the Music News podcast is there's always going to be some form of government connection or influence into these stories. Whether you are heavily involved into politics or you're not, the stories will always affect you.
And that's why it pays to be interested, even if you have, sweeping criticisms of the way we arrange our governments, like I do and like many of us do. You still should kind of like have an idea of what's going on so you can do something. But in positive news, the mention of governments in this is all positive. We had one the other week, and it was, I think we had one positive, and then it was all negative. And they have been pretty shit lately, particularly the New South Wales state government. And how it's choosing to pursue people who have been strip searched unlawfully by them. We won't go into that. Listen to the last music news if you do want a bit more background on what's going on in that department. But in this department, we are at the end of the year, and it is a time of the year where, first of all, we're in Oz Music Month. So a lot of good stuff happens there, but we're in award season when we look back on the year that was and we award the people who did really, really well.
You know
and
what?
This year...
Those things probably coincide deliberately, I would imagine.
Well, yeah, the Oz Music Month thing.
Yeah. And actually, I hadn't actually connected those dots, but when you just said it out loud, I was like, you know what? This makes perfect sense for the ARIAs and this first story we're going to talk about to happen this month.
It does. I had the same thing as I said it then too. And I was like, that makes sense. And then I was like, I'll just keep saying things so it sounds like I already 100% knew that.
Well, I wasn't on the same wavelength. I was playing a different bass line. Okay, I'm dropping that analogy. I promise, no more.
We're honest, if not much else, guys. But yeah, we're recording this Tuesday 25th. On Monday, the night before, we had the inaugural New South Wales Music Prize, and that was announced. So this is really cool, I think, and it's another kind of progression in the centering and focusing the arts and music in and around what government does. We've been banging on about this for the last couple of years. A big shift. For context, regular listeners will be bored of me talking about this, but if you're new, a really big shift happened at the change of government, both federally and at state level here in New South Wales, when we switched from the Morrison Liberal government and the Perrottet Liberal government to the Albanese and Minns governments. Now, we have huge criticisms of both those governments in a lot of ways, but they have been very good generally with arts and cultural policy, although what the Minns government's doing with regard to strip searching is like, it's not directly, an arts thing, but it's in that realm and they're being horrible. But anyway, I digress. Part of what both has been done at a state and federal level is developing contemporary music strategies and strategies that are going to guide us into how we approach our own art scenes for the next 10 years. The New South Wales Music Prize is part of the state government and Sound New South Wales, which is also a new body, their plan for the 10-year contemporary music strategy in New South Wales. And this was the first version of it. So it's very exciting, I think, and really good to be having another avenue where artists are supported and recognised and spotlighted as well. So the way this worked was the awards were held on Monday. It was at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney. And it's been dubbed the country's newest and, quote, most lucrative music awards.
Yeah, I had issue with that. I had issue with that. I mean, I suppose maybe lucrative because of financially. Like maybe in terms of just the amount of money that is on offer, it is the most. Which I can understand why the government would be touting that. But I don't know, can lucrative mean more than just financially? Like, is there arguments we had that the ARIA Awards is a much more lucrative prize, or is lucrative purely just financial? And I'm, crossing, prestige or, or some of those other words into lucrative as a combined.
The definition of lucrative, I just Googled it, is specifically related to profit. But you could also make you can make a less direct argument for ARIA winnings in terms of what it would lead to for an artist. But in terms of direct prize money, they're calling this the most lucrative. So I see where you're coming from in that sense, but I suppose their definition is more direct.
Yeah, because, okay. I mean, I'm not against it. Like, I don't know. I just, when you read it, you think, oh, that doesn't feel right. Because there are bigger awards to win. But I suppose from a purely financial perspective, which, as you just said, is the definition of lucrative, then I suppose it is a true statement. Carry on.
Well, let's just say the New South Wales Music Prize comes with $80,000 directly from winning it. However, you could definitely argue that perhaps an artist would make more than that if they won, a flagship ARIA type award. But you guys out there, you can.
Yeah, I mean,
about that.
Just for comparison, because I was curious about just, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping the gun a little bit to what you might have wanted to talk about, but Good Intent, the Greater Good initiative that they have, which is also a music prize. Because I was thinking, okay, this is a government thing. 80 grand for the winner. You think, well, that doesn't feel like a lot in the grand scheme of things. Like you hear about government, like how much money did the bloody bomb blow on their new website, for example, right?
There's a podcast I was like about to listen to this morning about that because I'm like, I really need to going on. The strangest, we're going off here, but the strangest organisation in this country to be constantly shrouded in controversy is the Bureau of Meteorology. And like, it's just so weird. Just fucking tell us the weather. And
I just realised I called them bomb, and I remember a few years ago they had a media statement saying we no longer want to be referred to as the bomb. We're either like Bureau of Meteorology is like what you should call us. It's everyone's
And then
like, you don't understand how the internet works, my friend.
they tried to go to the Bureau and everyone was like,
Yeah.
you can't do that. And then that was a whole other controversy. And then there was a story about like systemic bullying and mismanagement and shit coming out. And I was like, you're the weather guys. Stop it. Stop this.
Yeah, I meant to go, oh, I want to put the washing on. Is it going to rain this afternoon? That's what I need to come to you for. But anyway, all that aside, you look at 80 grand and you go, probably could have been more. But so I thought, what are some of the more independent prizes, right? So I went to the good intent, the greater good. The top cash grant prize is $4,000. So in that perspective, 80 grand for the winner is certainly a hell of a lot of money. And again, I suppose ties into, you know, the most lucrative prize as the government are touting. I meant to put on a funny accent / voice, but I didn't really mean for it to come across that condescending.
That's funny because we started this being like, no, the government have done good here. And then we're like 5 minutes in and Cam's going, the most lucrative prize.
Anyway, get us back on track.
I'll get us back on track. It was a good award. And Cam, I see your arguments for this too. And like, yeah, anyway, they are putting a lot of money into music generally, but when you see where they put other money elsewhere, you do think, well,
yeah, okay. Yeah,
80 grand gets you like one album these days at a higher level, I suppose. But anyway.
Yes. Which is, I mean, to be fair, like if you're an artist and you win this prize, you go, sweet, that's 80 grand I don't need to spend. Like I'm not saying 80 grand is not a lot of money. Like if I won 80 grand, I'd be stoked. You know, that's not the point I'm making. I'm just saying, yeah, when you look at some of the spendings more broadly across government, you think, well, you know, I don't know. Maybe you should just say you should be grateful that we're getting any art spending because, you know, this is the first time it's ever happened and we're already sad. So let's not be those pessimistic, angry, sad people who are constantly, woe me, it should be more. Let's just be grateful that we've got something from the government. Let's...
You're like Sasha with the ham, Cam. You know what I mean?
I am.
You're like, oh, 80 grand, and you go away looking for someone to give you 1.2 million. And then no one does. You come back and you go, is that actually
Where's my
still there?
Yeah, where's my cheeseburger patty? I don't want your ham. Okay, I'll go back for the ham. Is the ham still available? I'll take the ham, thank you.
But the New South Wales Music Prize is the main award. But there were 3 awards up for grand. The total prize pool of money is $160,000. The New South Wales Music Prize, a flagship, that's $80,000. There's a New South Wales First Nations Music Prize worth 40 grand. And a New South Wales Breakthrough Artist of the Year award, also worth 40 grand. Now, because this is a new award, I think it's reasonable to run through how the eligibility works, and I won't make it super boring, but just so you understand, the period of eligibility was from 1st of July 2024 to the 30th of June 2025. For the music prize itself, they're saying, you must be a current New South Wales-based artist, meaning you actually live there, or a previously New South Wales-based artist who has toured or worked in New South Wales in the preceding 24 months before 30th of June 2025, demonstrating their connection. So maybe if you were an artist who's recently got an opportunity to go to live overseas and you've moved in the last 12 months, but before that you were New South Wales through and through, then you're in. All good. You must have sound recordings that have had their first public release in Australia during the eligibility period in the eligible genres and eligible formats. So it's all pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
With regard...
I was just going to say, I quite like the criteria. Like it's not open to anyone. So you can't have a Queenslander submitting music for a New South Wales award and getting out money.
With the way they bloody select state of origin teams these days, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, the Tongan's going to roll in and win the award. But I quite like the criteria that they've got here because it's broad enough where it's like, it's not like a hard line where it's like, sorry, you're not here anymore. It's like, well, I was, but now, an opportunity took me to London or whatever the case is. I think they've done a good job. Good job, state government. You can,
I think so.
package that up, and then we'll play it next time someone says, "Oh, you do shit on the government."
Yep. And with the Breakthrough Artist of the Year, it's a similar kind of setup. In terms of how they characterize the Breakthrough Artist of the Year, You have to have had the achievement of a major breakthrough, marking a significant shift in public recognition, including the emergence of a wider fan base or crossover into mainstream or broader cultural awareness, or activities and achievements with clear momentum and growth potential, positioning the artist or act for continued success and the possibility of becoming a household name in the next 12 to 18 months. They're also saying, with the living in New South Wales type thing, and those kind of requirements there, if you're a band, it has to be at least 50% of the band that adheres to that. And similarly with the First Nations Music Prize, obviously the artist must be First Nations and have a strong cultural connection to the land now known as New South Wales. Again, with acts with multiple members, you have to have kind of at least 50% identifying as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. And it's kind of similar from there on in terms of, you must have had your music released in the eligibility period, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just kind of like how this was selected, and the panel that selects it, it's a bunch of industry professionals from all facets of the industry who kind of make these decisions. So that's that out of the way, just in case you were curious. I think it's good. I think it's a good way of arranging it. Like you said, there's enough slack where they're understanding the flexibility of artistry and how it can move and change pretty quickly, but they're also kind of keeping it locked down on the state, so you can't have any blow-ins coming and taking awards from the New South Wales artists.
Yeah, which, nothing going to piss me off more than a bloody Victorian coming up and taking our funds. It's like, your art scene's good enough down there, pal. Yeah. You don't need to take ours. Back. We're trying our best.
Close the border. but yeah, so we've got that going. The winner of the New South Wales Music Prize last night, 3 nights ago, if you're listening on the day of release, it's a podcast, was Speed. Sorry to do that. Speed won at the hardcore band with their album Only One Mode. If you are aware of Speed, they've been having a pretty meteoric rise over the last 12 months or so. Absolutely worthwhile. And it's good to see hardcore getting recognised in that space, which the band said so themselves. They're really stoked about it. They beat out artists like Rufus Du Sol, 1-4, 3%, Barker, Coastie, Nina Geraci, Kobe D, and a bunch more for that 80K. They're currently coming off, I think, back-to-back shows in South Korea, which just shows you kind of like how that band has grown over the last 12 months. And they have said, which I really like, they said that they see this award as a recognition not just of themselves, but of the hardcore scene in New South Wales, which has been like really working hard and producing some really good artists over the last few years and getting itself more and more into the eyes and ears of people who may not normally listen to hardcore. And they don't know what they're going to do with the money yet, but they're planning to use that money in a way that benefits the whole scene and not just themselves, which I think is a really nice kind of community type attitude and approach to winning something like this. Yeah,
because it sort of ties in a little bit with what we were chatting to Dialectic about community and, how, he's a drummer who does electronic music, but, someone like Ben Jones, for instance, is making completely different music, but they have something in common, and so they're all from the Central Coast music community. I suppose they're taking a similar approach here, which is saying a bit more broadly, but it's for the, the hardcore scene, which is, another one of those music scenes which isn't mainstream. It has its own real, pun intended, hardcore following, and those people in those scene, if you can sort of champion those and sort of use this win to sort of elevate hardcore music all across the state, like that's fantastic. And I tip my hat to them because, as we know, music is not cheap to make. So when you win, $80,000, it could be very easy just to go, cool, that's our studio time and music video and, artists, for the album artwork and all that stuff. That's all that covered, or, however you want to do it. But it's nice that they're going to try and, benefit the whole scene with this as well. So congratulations to Speed.
Yeah, 100%. It's the rising tide lifts all boats type attitude, which is very commonplace in the music industry and has served it very well. And it's, I suppose, very much tying into a lot of the
Getting
things we're going to
emotional.
talk about in this episode. I'm getting emotional. I'm burping out of emotion. The New South Wales First Nations Music Prize, which is worth $40,000, was won by rapper Barker with her album Big Tidder. She beat out artists like 3%, Janabar, Stiff Gins, and Ziggy Ramo for that one as well. I think I wrote about one of Barker's latest releases on our Who's Who, probably a little while ago now. But yeah, fantastic, fantastic artist, doing really, really good things. And I don't know, just bringing really, really good things to the scene generally, that connection to culture, that raw connection to culture as well, but a tremendous attitude with which she approaches everything as well. So massive congratulations to Barker on that one too.
Indeed. And then equally big but slightly bigger from us, congratulations, goes to the New South Wales Breakthrough Artist of the Year, who, as Eamon said, won 40 grand. This was won by electronic artist and, of course, from the Central Coast, Nina Geraci. If we had a woohoo sound effect, this is where we'd be playing it, but we're not that advanced, so we don't have it playing for you. But
we don't have it.
Nina Geraci, congratulations. Just a girl from Kingumba, continuing to do good things. And this is not the last time we'll be shouting out and congratulating Nina Geraci on winning something in this episode.
Yeah, very, very big week for Nina Geraci. So she's picked up 40K for Breakthrough Artist of the Year, beating artists like Don West, Royal Otis, Shady Nasty, and Speed Again. So yeah, really cool. I just think it's really nice. It's again, it's just, I mean, from the outside, you might, okay, cool, they got an awards night, they're giving money. Like, obviously, we know the tangible, direct impacts of that. But the less direct, the less kind of noticeable impact is we're just further entrenching a bit of tradition into what the government does and how it deals with the arts system. And it also deepens that relationship and builds these kind of things that were never there before. We didn't have a Music New South Wales a few years ago. We didn't have a New South Wales Music Prize a few years ago, nor a 10-year contemporary strategy. All of these things are related to one another and they are all happening. So as we've said a few times, we're going to look back in 10 years' time and really be able to see the fruits that have born from these kind of actions right now. So it is really nice to see. And of course, all really, really deserving, fantastic artists who have been doing amazing things. So big congratulations to those artists. They were delivered via Sound New South Wales as well, as I mentioned. And I was pretty interested in what John Graham, who's the New South Wales Minister from Music and Nighttime Economy, what he had to say. So we had the normal pleasantries saying he's very excited to be awarding them. He said these awards are about putting the spotlight on New South Wales so fans have a chance to celebrate the local music scene. The last bit that I found particularly interesting, the streaming revolution is pushing more American music to Australian listeners. This award is part of our effort to support local musicians to cut through and build a fan base, which shows, I mean, we've been talking about kind of the roots of these problems for a while, but the fact that, you know, as part of his delivering of an award, he's making mention of this, and we're about to jump onto a story that directly relates to this as well. We're seeing a pretty concerted push within the Australian music industry and arts scene, which includes government, to work out a way to get, because the algorithms aren't doing it, to get Australian music back into the ears of Australians. So it was just interesting, I thought, to hear that coming out of John Graham's mouth at this awards night, because, you know, he didn't necessarily have to make mention of that. You could just focus on, oh yeah, look at these fantastic artists from our state who have done really well, we're recognizing them, that's great. The normal things you'd expect from politicians, you wouldn't necessarily expect that little mention there, but it does make more sense when we get to one of our next stories.
Yeah, I think there were some, you know, interesting points out of each of them. So that last one that you mentioned about the streaming push to more American music, and this is our way to try and help Australians find more Australian music. I suppose you could connect that into the Spotify story that we spoke about, how they've made a deal with Spotify to sort of showcase New South Wales music venues, which, you know, we had our skepticisms about at the time because naturally of, you know, the two main people who we were talking about, in that being the government and Spotify. But, you know, those two things combined, you like, as Eamon mentioned, you can sort of starting to see a bit of the progress being made here. You can start to see the momentum moving, and some of the ideas that were planted, you know, 5 or so years ago are starting to make a bit more sense now. But the other quote that he made was about putting, these musicians in the spotlight across New South Wales so fans have a chance to celebrate the local music scene. How much of them winning this prize do you think actually translates to cultural relevancy? Like for, whether it's Speed, they won the music prize. Do you think there will then be more people going, oh, Speed won this prize, they must be good, maybe I should go check them out? Like, do you think it actually translates in that manner? Or is it more just something for the band to say, look, we won this thing, so when they're pitching for festivals or they're pitching to labels or whatever, it can help them in that way? Like, I'm not saying there's no benefit, but I don't know. I'm just trying to get your opinion on the direct correlation.
Yeah, I reckon it's the same question as direct, indirect. I reckon indirect, absolutely. Like in that, they can use that. Obviously, they can use the money. That's obvious. They can use the prestige of having won that award to get them more places. I reckon on a public level, not yet. I don't think it would move the needle a huge amount just yet, but that's because it's the first year. I think once like we were saying, once we've built this tradition that every year we have the New South Wales Music Prize and everyone starts to anticipate it, everyone starts to pay attention when the nominees are announced, and everyone starts to build towards that awards night. I think within the industry and within the wider public, provided it's, covered and reported on, which I'm sure it will be, in 10 years' time, I think this will, when you see, okay, this artist won the New South Wales Music Prize, I've never heard of them, let's have a listen. Whereas right now, because it's such a new thing that plenty of people listening may not have even known about it, as we didn't really until we saw this story, you're going to go, okay, that's cool. And then, things move on. There's not that kind of anticipation period, but I think it will have that potential down the track. It's just kind of the natural reality of it being its first year that it's not going to have a huge public impact just yet.
Yeah, I hope it does get there as well, to be clear. Like, I'm not saying this is a completely pointless exercise. I'm very much appreciative and supportive of the fact that the government are wanting to support the arts, because as I mentioned, I was wanting cheeseburgers, but I'll certainly settle for ham. Because I've been used to getting absolute crumbs for so long. So the fact that I'm even getting ham is super exciting. I'm just, I'm hoping to get to a cheeseburger, to continue that analogy. But yeah, I think it is good. And as I agree with you, Eamon, I think over time it will become more of a thing. It will become more relevant because as well, then, again, let's just fast forward 5 years down the track. Speed win this award. Say Speed then go on to, tour internationally. Maybe, God willing, they play at, the Australian Open or an NRL Grand Final or something. Some big national event potentially, or they, headlining festivals, whatever the case is, Speed are there. You can then look at that in 5 years' time and go, I've just won the same award that Speed did 5 years ago, and look at their career. It suddenly becomes a much bigger deal in that perspective too.
Yeah, and John Graham, 100%. John Graham mentioned as well in that it will inspire the next generation to aim high. That is another part of it. This is another thing you can achieve as an artist. Here's someone like you doing it, and we know that no matter what part of the world you're talking about, or society or humanity you're talking about, being able to see someone like you do something inspires the next lot of people to go and chase that and do that themselves. So I think, yeah, all positive impacts, but as with a lot of these initiatives, which we are in the first few years of, you're going to need to, let it run out for 5 years to a decade, and then we can really measure their impact. But I think it will happen. I think I'd be very surprised if it didn't. But yeah, really good. Congratulations to those winners. And yeah, I think it's great that we have something of this prestige recognising music in our state, because especially when you consider that, had things gone differently, we may not have any of this still whatsoever at either a state or a federal level.
Definitely. And also, I think we have mentioned it, but I just want to put an emphasis on it. The three winners, if you look at the genres, you have a hardcore band winning the music prize, a rapper winning the First Nations, and an electronic artist winning the Breakthrough. Like, those three genres, they're not necessarily the mainstream that you would hear, just about anywhere you go. Like, they do feel like they have their more niche followings. I think particularly, hardcore's, I'm not saying it's not big, but as I'm saying, mainstream, not as recognized. Rap is probably the more, although certainly, still has its niche, and electronic is certainly I would argue, incredibly niche, particularly the type of music that Nina Geraci makes.
Yeah,
You know, it's not
100%.
the
And,
Avicii dance electronic. It's certainly different.
Yeah, and we do have to take a moment and acknowledge that we know Triple M listeners around the country are despairing at this decision, and I for one will be putting my FM radio out to mark the loss of any traditional Australian rock artists in these awards.
I mean, how was Paul Kelly not nominated for the Breakthrough Artist of the Year? That song, his album only just came out. Like, although
National treasure, Paul Kelly.
Absolutely. That was meant to no shade to Paul Kelly, but obviously continuing the Triple M dig. Anyway, quickly, while we're speaking of award winners, we mentioned it just before, but let's quickly run through the ARIA Awards. Best independent release went to Nina Geraci. The Michael Gudinski Breakthrough Artist of the Year went to Nina Geraci.
Best solo artist?
Yep, said it wouldn't be the only mention. Best solo artist went to Nina Geraci for her album I Love My Computer. The best soul R&B release went to Boy Soda with Little Obsession. So another Coastie doing good things. Yep. Congrats to Bray. Best Australian live act was Troye Sivan. Song of the Year went to The Kid Laroi with Girls. And then Album of the Year, Eamonn and the Sniffers with Cartoon Darkness. And can I just say, Eamon, I assume you saw the Eamonn and the Sniffers story that sort of made headlines last week?
Regarding the Fed Square show?
Yes.
Yes.
How awesome. Did you hear about what happened after?
Yes, the bar tab thing. I was almost going to say we should talk about it for this, but we had so much. But we can make quick mention.
Just very quick,
of that. Yeah. They had a show at Fed Square organised in Melbourne. It wasn't able to go ahead due to concerns of a crowd crush because I think a lot of people rushed in at the last minute. I think
there was something about the barriers weren't stable enough, or some of the barriers had been broken down, or there was some sort of safety risk there.
Yeah, which is disappointing, but of course, had someone died, we'd be having a completely different discussion. So we got to always err on the side of safety. But Eamonn and the Sniffers, having not played, just went around to, was it 7 venues, and just put $5,000 on the bar in Melbourne and just said, have a drink on us for anyone who wants one, which was just awesome.
And they weren't just, your random pub. They were like small music venues that were also, they were smaller venues that supported live music, and they just put $5,000 on the tab and said, have a drink on us. And it was just such an awesome thing because, I don't want to keep mentioning it, but artists, they don't make a whole heap of money. Now, you could, Eamonn and the Sniffers, I know they've just been touring. They may be, they're probably as hot as they have ever been, both here and overseas. And I expect that to continue. But for them to just say, we were going to do a free gig at Federation Square that's no longer going ahead, here's $5,000 across 7 venues. It's just such an awesome thing.
It is. And Amy Taylor, in her ARIA speech, made mention that she doesn't have to work at IGA anymore. So even if they are making good money now, it's not like they've been making good money for a long time. It's still a lot of money that, they've got to divide between 4 or 5 members of the band, plus whoever else. So it is, the gesture is huge. And it again speaks to that lovely community spirit there where they, they're very selective in the venues they choose and they're trying to rise that tide. So we absolutely love to see it. And they also, I think they won Best Rock Album as well, and Best Video Clip too, I think, Eamonn and the Sniffers. So it was unreal. But yeah, the Central Coast representation was fantastic. And I'm going to just bring out a personal gripe here and what was meant to be a quick mention. I saw a couple of posts on the Central Coast New South Wales subreddit over the last few weeks being like, what big artists have actually come out of the Central Coast? And the people mentioning were just kind of like, oh, this. And then one person would be like, Nina Geraci just won 3 ARIAs and is doing an amazing thing. And then, but I feel like within our own region even, we still need a greater recognition of who we're producing. Because Boy Soda didn't get mentioned, in the things that I was reading there. No one really realizes that Boy Soda originates out of Terrigal, even though he lives in Sydney now. But there's so many good artists here on the Central Coast, and they are doing really, really good things, and that tide is only rising. So I hope people from our own area, even though we are preaching to the choir right here, do recognise that.
Yeah, it's such a puzzling... I'll continue on this gripe. It wasn't meant to be a quick mention, but I find that comment really weird because if they've asked the question, they're obviously somewhat engaged in, I would imagine, Australian music or, music at least locally. For them to ask that question, but then, yeah, I can understand, Boy Soda now living in Sydney. Maybe you weren't aware of the earlier stuff. That's fine. Nina Geraci's still very much, as far as I'm aware, a coastie, and certainly, at least as of recently, I was saying, I'm a girl from Kincumber. How the hell did I end up here? Sort of thing when she was playing at Coachella or a big festival, one of the major international festivals. But then you've also, if you're engaged in that, you've got to be somewhat engaged, I'd imagine, in Triple J, which the Moving Stills, Molly Millington, like the list is almost endless because of how many coasties have been played on the J's, not just with Ango, but
yeah, particularly thanks to Ango.
Particularly with Ango, but even before Ango, there was still plenty of coasties being played on the J's. So I just find that puzzling. Were they wanting a short stack reunion tour or something like that?
I don't know.
They're from Budgie,
I don't know. Yes, they are. And one of the, I think I was reading, there was mention on that of Short Stack, and one of the members I think is a teacher. Apparently a really funny guy. So
one of them's a real estate agent too.
Yes. We've done really well. We've always kind of punched very, very strongly when you consider the size of our area. But I think what is happening on the coast right now is increasing that visibility, but that engagement. We need visibility and engagement with people from our own scene, from our own area, which leads us beautifully into the next story for tonight's music news, or today's music news. And then if we can, attach that same principle Australia-wide, we've made brief mention of it, but it's worth diving in, given it's Oz Music Month right now, to the Ozify campaign, which you may have seen bumping around. It's a really good campaign that's been going on. Really slickly put together, really well put together campaign that brings in some of Australia's hottest musical talent. Thelma Plum and Kelly Holiday are spearheading it. They're the kind of faces of this campaign. Basically, the idea is simply to get more Aussies to listen to homegrown music, which is a simple task, but as we've discussed in previous music news, is actually kind of not that simple for listeners in 2025.
Yeah, and Kelly Holiday as well, just while we're mentioning Kelly Holiday, also winner of numerous ARIA Awards as well. So, Adam doing, fantastic things with his side project there. But yeah, this is, we mentioned it in the comment from the Minister for the Music and the Nighttime Economy, John Graham, saying that the streaming revolution is pushing more American music to Australian listeners. And, the award that we just spoke about was to try and help us find and support local musicians. And that's what this is all connected to, because a lot of these streaming, I've even mentioned it so many times as well, like the Discover Weekly. My playlists are almost exclusively Australian. I engage in recent, uploads of Australian musicians, and I go through my Discover Weekly, and I don't know, I suppose you could credit Spotify for it, but I listen to a song and I go, this sounds good. And then I go to check them out and they're American. I'm like, bugger, they're American. Yeah. Or if they're Australian, I'd be psyched and stoked about it. So am I annoyed because they gave me an American artist when clearly I mainly listen to Australian? Or should I be happy because the algorithm's actually done a good job and played me a song that I do like? It just turns out they're not Australian.
I think there's a balance. I don't think we should completely shield ourselves from international music, but I think the balance has been in the wrong direction. And I think that's kind of what this acknowledges. And hopefully what there is a shift happening, like you kind of mentioned before, we've got state government striking deals. We have the ARIA deal, which is quite controversial. But we have kind of these things happening, this recognition of it. And maybe the heads at Spotify and look after Australia again. Okay, we need to tweak the algorithm more. We need to get more Aussie music in there, because the most staggering, one of the most staggering learnings of 2025 music news, I think for me, was the study we reported on maybe a month or maybe 2 months ago now, which basically said, yes, the majority of Australian listeners want to listen to more Australian music. They just don't know how. In a world where we have the highest level of music accessibility ever, we have Aussie listeners not knowing the best way to get their own content because the major streamers aren't feeding it to them, and there's a whole other discussion around that, which we went into. So go back in the Music News archives if you want to hear it.
I think.
But what this campaign, it seeks to address that.
Yeah, sorry, if I can just jump in. I think a large part of that is when you say people don't know how to access it. It's not saying they don't know how to go to Spotify and search for the music. It's that they don't know who to search for. They don't know if they're not currently engaged in Australian music. They go, I want to hear more of it, but I don't know who's popular because commercial radio aren't playing Australian musicians as much as they should be or used to be. The streaming services aren't offering up Australian content in a easy, accessible way. And, Triple J, as much as it is the national broadcaster, the type of music that would be on their playlists probably isn't, everyone's cup of tea either. So that's what this is sort of, as you said, sort of trying to address. But I just wanted to try and speak on that part, which is it's not people aren't dumb and they don't know how to open Spotify and search for Australian music. It's just they don't know which Australian musicians to search for. They don't know which entities they should be searching for. What are the good playlists, that might be, I might like AC/DC and that type of music. How do I find current modern Australian music that sound, that is that type of rock and roll or, whatever it is. Like, these are the shortcomings at the moment of these streaming services.
Yeah, and whether we all like to admit it or not, the algorithm is forming most of our music discovery. Unless you're a hard out radio listener, there's an algorithm that's forming part of your music discovery. And when people say they don't know how, it's, again, not that they don't know how to use a search bar in Spotify, it's that their listening habits, within that, there is not a means to discover Australian music. You would have to radically change your listening habits, which, again, whether we like to admit it or not, is hard for people. Even if it is easy to do, it's hard for people to change this habitual way that we operate. So,
it's a habit for a reason, right?
Exactly. So this Ozify your algo push is just an attempt to address that. It's an attempt to kind of call people into action and also make it easier for people to find these. So the damning stat out of it is that less than 10% of songs streamed in Australia are created by local artists, which is extremely damning. You'd hope that was at least around 50-50, but nowhere near. And Kelly Holiday said that artists simply wanted local music fans to seek out homegrown releases rather than passively listen to curated playlists dominated by international superstars. The idea of it being the more Australian music that people play, the more the algorithms are going to serve up Australian music in people's feed, because they are fed by the listening habits of those, users of the platform, particularly geographically based as well. So that 10% stat is so low, and all this is trying to do is create this kind of campaign where you're going to see it in ads, you're going to see it online, you're going to see it on billboards, and then an easy way for you to go and find these is some playlists that have been curated by Ozify that are available. There's Bandcamp kind of ideas that have been pushed, gig guides, obviously getting in physical. There's an idea to up your streaming game, to share on socials, et cetera, and flood radios with requests, which is really good. So they've got this really good website called ozify.com.au, which I'd encourage you to check out. The launch video for it is great. Like, really, we talk about Australian arts, even just the creativity in making that video, kudos to whoever directed it and the many Australian artists who feature in it. But it's basically, about almost grassroots, not grassroots, I suppose, because it's supported by the government, etc. But it's grassroots in that it's the Australian music industry coming together to solve a problem without it being solved by the people who created it, if you know what I mean.
Which is typical of problems when it relates to Australian music, is that the people who cause the problems aren't the ones who are held responsible for fixing the problems. It's often on the artists and the independents and the people within the scene who don't really have much spare time or money, but they're the ones who have to hold their hand up to try and fix it because, as I said, the people who caused the problem in the first place aren't really willing or able to fix it. But it's a fantastic campaign. I'm sure we're definitely preaching to the choir with this podcast, but maybe this is a part where you can, if you weren't aware of it, but obviously it's something you're already doing, maybe you can tell other people and try and get them involved. Kelly Holiday said that, we're not trying to tell people what music to listen to. We're just trying to say that we need your support more than ever now, because it's really hard to be a musician in Australia. pretty much ever since COVID. He actually even said, many people don't know this, but Australian music as it currently stands is at an all-time low as far as listening numbers are concerned, which is obviously troubling and problematic. As you said, it's only 10% of the Australian listenership actually listen to Australian music. I'd love to know what that compares to in, say, I was going to say Germany, but maybe like a language barrier makes it easier to listen to German music as opposed to the popular, Taylor Swift's or Sabrina Carpenter's, Ed Sheeran's, whatever the case is. But they obviously dominate the airwaves here in Australia. And currently the K-pop Demon Hunters is dominating the airways. That's still on. It's been played on commercial radio, which is number one on the ARIAs. I don't know if it still is, but it was last time we did a chart check. I'll just try and do it very quickly live. ARIA top 50 singles, number one. Oh no. K-pop's down to number 3. Whatever will they do? Olivia Dean, number 1. Taylor Swift, number 2, if you were curious.
We do our check-ins there. But yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. It's really good to see. And like, hopefully this does lead to some change. But I think when you combine all the bits, we have had, you were just talking about the ARIA charts, Cam. We've had them change the way they measure that. We're not really seeing that have much of an impact just yet.
I was just going to say,
hopefully that's a time thing.
On that, we have currently one Australian in the top 50 single charts, and that is Tame Impala with Dracula.
Yeah, which speaks to that 10% kind of thing going on. The low listening habits, but we are seeing, like, in the last 12 months, a lot has happened, and we've got the government obviously speaking about it. They're trying to get the ear of the streaming companies, whether you like them or not, which we've talked about. We've got campaigns like this, and we've got the ARIA charts changing. So hopefully all these things do combine to arrest this problem, because we really don't want to end up in a very homogenized cultural world where the only things people listen to is what's popular on TikTok the world over, because that's bad. Then you lose your culture, your local culture completely. So we've got this big push. It is nice to see. I would very much encourage you to check out the Ozify campaign, check out the website, watch the video. It's great. And then, see if there's things that you can do amongst your own friend group, your own circles, your own socials, or even your own listening habits to go and, focus and discover more Australian artists, because it could result in the algorithm shifting and all of a sudden a more flourishing environment for the Australian music scene.
And if you don't know where to start, may I recommend going to the link in the show notes or on our bio on Instagram to our playlist on Spotify. If you are a Spotify user, we have 2 playlists there. One is Homebrewed Selects, which is our Australian music playlist. We try to update it weekly, but sometimes it's fortnightly or every 3 weeks, but it is still being updated. We just don't mention it very often, but it is there. And then we also have the local list by Homebrewed, which is purely for Central Coast music. So if you want to engage in the wider Australian scene, Homebrewed Selects is your place to go on Spotify. If you are purely wanting to try and connect more to the local scene, to where we are on the Central Coast, the local list by Homebrewed is a place for that as well. But that's one way you can support it, streaming music. Another way is to buy some merch. And just quickly to wrap up, today, if you're listening to this on the day that the episode drops, it is currently Oz Music T-shirt Day. So I hope you're wearing an Australian music T-shirt, because it is today. If not, today is your reminder to buy one. If you go to Oz Music T-shirt Day, they have a range there, or you can go to your favorite artists and try and buy one. I actually tried to do this throughout the week for 2 artists, and they were sold out in the designs and sizes that I needed, which I was bummed about. Like, come on, guys, of all the weeks, make sure you've got this. Of all the time that, to not have stock, you've picked the worst week because it's Oz Music T-shirt Day this week. Like, make sure you've got stock. Come on. But anyway.
It could be a sign that they've sold so well the nation over, you never know. But it's a great day. I'm wearing one now, Station Model Violence. I don't know if anyone's ever going to see this. I'm showing my shirt up, Sydney band. But yeah, they've raised, at the time of recording, $253,000 for Support Act, which is really, really good. Obviously, the Charity Support Act is fantastic. They support the whole spectrum of Australian music. So everyone from independent artists who, are struggling week to week to survive, to the roadies and the crew and all the other pieces of the puzzle that make us able to go to shows and see the scene. So they help mental health and wellbeing support, First Nations support, crisis relief, etc. Fantastic charity. So yeah, don your favorite shirt. If you're already on your way to work and you're thinking, oh, I forgot to put my Australian music t-shirt on. I don't care where you are. Turn around, go home and put it on.
Or buy one today on their website. Go to Oz Music T-Shirt Day. Google it. The website is ozmusictshirtday.org.au. Go to there, buy one, or you can, donate some money. TikTok as sort of matching donations as well, is my understanding, which is, pretty cool. We tend to bag on TikTok a little bit for, their discoverability, at least here in Australia, where a lot of the music you hear from the trends is not Australian, but, they are at least putting some money somewhere and supporting Oz Music T-Shirt Day. If you want to know more about Oz Music T-Shirt Day too, we do actually have a chat in the archives with Clive Miller, who is the CEO of Oz Music T-Shirt Day. So search for Clive Miller and either on our podcast feed or just into your podcast thing, and it might come up as well. But I think that'll do us for this one, because, Eamon, you've got to skedaddle pretty quickly.
I do have to skedaddle. I've got a doctor's appointment coming up thick and fast. But thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the music news. We'll have at least one more of these to get out to you before the year is out. We have a Patreon. If you are liking what we're doing and you would like to support our work, you can find that in the show notes for this show. Of course, we've got more fantastic interviews with local to us music artists, music personalities. We're from the Central Coast. We also all regularly feature national artists as well. So go back through the archives, keep your ears out for new stuff coming, and we will see you next time.
That we will. I'll drop a little teaser here. Next week, you're going to hear from the very man who we mentioned a little bit ago. He's on Triple J. He champions Central Coast music. And I'm actually going to quote him here. He said that we are the best music region out of the country at the moment. So just to tie in before about that little subreddit, maybe we should link this episode with Ango and be like, well, Ango reckons we're the best in the country at the moment. We're slightly biased, but we agree. So
yes,
how's that? But yes, you have that to enjoy next week in this exact feed. We will see you then.
Bye. Fuck NBN. I'll leave that up to you to determine what NBN I'm referring to, but hopefully you are an enemy of theirs as we are after listening to that podcast, which was produced by my good friend Cameron Smith and came about via the magic of the internet. For more magic internet, head to www.homebrewed.au.